What I'm going to do in this video is show you how to edit your square items via Spreadsheet. Now, this is useful because if you need to bulk update something, like your pricing, or you need to change some item titles, then you don't have to wait for your pages to load over and over and over and over again in the main dashboard. So the way we do this is we go over to Items, and this is under Items and Orders, and then Items. And I'm assuming that you have items in the system already. If you don't, that's not a problem. You can just download the blank template to upload your initial items if you want. But we're going to cover mostly editing, but this also applies to completely uploading a new item library. So what we'll do is go over here to the item library, items, item library, and then actions, and then we will tell it to export library. Now, we can still import the blank template, or rather export that so that we can import just new items, and we can just import the new items, or we can do all items exported, which is what we're going to do. And then we'll always do it in the Excel format, which is the default, unless you're working with an automated tool, like I've put things in ChatGPT before, or you're uploading it to something like that. But we'll do all items, Excel, and then export. And then it'll just take a moment to gather everything and download it. There we are. And we can open that, and I'll make it nice and big. And I typically like to remove this top blank row so that it makes it easier to filter the data. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. And then I'm going to go through these columns. Now it may look a little bit different depending which version of the point of sale you have, depending how many modifier sets you have. Obviously, this client has a lot of modifier sets, but that's because they're a restaurant. Typically, restaurants have a lot of modifier sets and retail doesn't even use them. But everything pretty much still applies except for a few key differences, like the maybe the fulfillment, especially the self-serve ordering, but we'll just start from left to right, go through the columns. This first column, column A, is token. And what this does is it identifies the item uniquely in the system. So that allows us to change all of the other aspects of the item without it creating a new item because it gets confused or anything like that. And it also allows it to identify it. So you see there's some items with the same name, but they're different variations. So it helps with that. And mainly it helps it know, okay, if I change all of these fields, it knows by the token it's the same item and it should be updated. It's not a new item. What that also means is on, say, this item or any other item, if we remove the token, it's going to now not update the item that's in the system already. It's going to create a new item for us because it looks for the token, and when the token is blank, it knows it needs to create a new item. But I'm not going to do that. Next one, this one's pretty self-explanatory. It's the item name. Now, this is the name of the top level item. I have another video that covers option sets, variations, and modifiers. If you're not familiar with the top level item versus the variations, then definitely watch that video and you can get some better context. But basically, this item name is the top level item. So then under the top level item, we have the variation name. And if it just has one variation, then this item name is the only name that appears, and then we have the regular variation, especially in a retail setting. Less so here. Here we go. So we have item name is custom order, and then we have regular, or we have deep fried chicken, regular, because there's no variations on it. I'm going to change one view setting real quick. We'll go ahead and freeze the top row. That's why I removed that very top line initially. Okay, so item name, and then we have our variation name, and this displays in the system, and it helps us understand what we're doing. So what we have here is we have two-piece baked cod, we have three of them, and we have lemon pepper, Cajun, and plain. So that's the seasoning that's in the batter. And we can get those three different options and set it up so that instead of having three separate items or having, so maybe say now it's not applicable here, but say that the Cajun and the lemon pepper cost $1 more. Then you can have that variation cost $1 more rather than having to have three separate items or do something with modifiers, but that's where you can use that variation in a restaurant setting. Next is SKU. Now, this isn't useful in the restaurant setting, but I'll go over it real quick. The SKU it stands for stock keeping unit, and that's basically just a code that represents the item in the system. It's sort of like the token, but the token is uniquely identifying it inside Square's system only. So the SKU, and in the retail setting, there's another field called GTIN, um, and the SKU could be something to identify it quickly, something to scan, probably not so much in a food setting, but this is really that scannable code or short code that represents the item. Now next we have the description. The description is displayed inside the system, it's displayed on the website, it's displayed everywhere that data is synced to. So a lot of times there's not much description in a food setting, but it's always beneficial to put more information for people to see what they're ordering, to understand what they're getting and what it's going to be like. Next, we have the category. Now, we can't manage multiple categories in the spreadsheet. We can only manage the one category, which translates to the reporting category. And so we have the category. This is sort of the primary category. And if you add a new category in there, it will go ahead and add the new category in the system. Next, we have the SEO title, SEO description, and permalink. Now, typically, I leave these blank. Typically, I recommend people leaving them blank and putting this information in the description and in the item name. But if you need the SEO title to be different and you want to change that periodically for keywords and all of that good stuff, then you can change that SEO title and SEO description for if people are searching it in, say, order food with Google, if they're searching it in DoorDash or anything like that, then it can be useful for that purpose. Now, the permalink, this can control in Square Online what the item's permalink is. So there's certain pieces that you can't remove, like slash product or stuff like that, but you can change after that. Instead of having whatever the item name is with dashes in between, you could update this to be something more readable, more relevant, anything like that. Next we have Square Online item visibility. Now there's three options here. I only see two so far here, but there's unavailable, which means that people can't see it, they can't order it, they can't search for it, they can't find it, so they just can't see it at all. There's one that's not here yet, and that's hidden, and that's kind of between unavailable and visible. So I'll explain visible. Visible is, of course, they can see it, they can buy it, they can find it in search results, they can see it everywhere and buy it. And then hidden is sort of in between unavailable and visible because unavailable means you can't see it or buy it or anything. Visible means everything. You can do everything. But hidden means you can't see it in search results. But if you have the link to it, that permalink, the direct link, then you can buy it. So it's kind of in between. Next is our weight. Now again, this is most useful for a retail setting for calculating shipping rates and all of that good stuff. But if you need that, it is here. And that's always in pounds, at least in the US. Next is our four fulfillment methods, and they're in separate columns. And you can change if it's available, yes or no. It's a little Y and a little N. They're capitalized though. And first we have shipping, whether that's enabled or not. Self-serve ordering, which is at restaurant QR code ordering. This is really only useful for a food setting. Next is delivery, and then pickup. Now, this all synchronizes with Square Online, with DoorDash, with all the different services that connect into Square. So we can control that from one place right here. Next, we have price, and this is, of course, the price of the item in dollars and cents, and we put in a decimal. So we put it like we have here 15.00, and if you put in just 15, it should correct to 15.00, and just that's how we enter it. Next, we have our online sale price. So this is if we're going to have a sale price in Square Online. For food, typically that, isn't necessary, but it is an option that's available. And what this will also do is if you have it set up to put a little banner on the item saying it's on sale, then it'll do that. It'll slash out the old price and put the new price to draw attention to it. But that's where you put that information in the same format as price. It just displays and functions a little differently. Next is our sellable and stockable. So these two, again, aren't very useful in a food setting, but sellable means the number of items that are available to sell, of course, and then stockable is the number that's can be stocked. So in a bundle, for instance, of items, there might be a certain number of sellable items, but it's not stockable unless it's one package. So if your bundle is already in a package, that would be considered stockable conceptually, and then also here, but most bundles are, at least online, you just put it together when you make it, and especially in a food setting as well, it's not really stockable. But it is sellable. And typically, I see most restaurants not using the inventory control capabilities because it just doesn't make sense to. So we'll move on from here. Next is auto add item to check. Now, what this means is if you have an item, say there's a drink, a beer, so like here we have a Miller Lite. We want auto add item to check to actually be yes if we just have one option there. Now, I'm not going to change the data here, but if we have an item that doesn't have any modifications, doesn't have any options, doesn't have any variations, there's nothing really to customize about it, or it almost never gets customized, then we can select yes, because you can always go back to the item and customize it. But if you want to speed things up a little bit, there's a lot of items that you can just do yes for, and then when they tap on it, when the server taps on it on the screen, it just adds it to the check without pulling up the detail screen. It just makes things a little bit quicker. Now next, we have our option name 1, option value 1, and then option name 2, value 2. So what this is, and we have an example, excellent example right here. This is our baked cod, right? And we have 3 seasoning choices. This is our option name 1. So this is the option set, right? Seasoning. And then we have the option value of lemon pepper, Cajun, and plain. So what this does is it's controlling what options are created. Now we need to, what variations are created. We need to create those variations more manually in here, but it gives us that drop down in the system. So instead of having it be kind of wonky and have the variations just set up with no options, or have modifiers, or have 3 separate items, we have that option set name, seasoning, and option value, lemon pepper, Cajun, and plain. Now this is the best setup because it's nice and simple for the customer, and it makes perfect sense, it's logical, and it's just a good way to use the system because that's how it's designed to be used. And next is option name 2 and value 2, and these are the same thing, but it's just a second option set if you want to include that. So if you had like seasoning and then you had another selection for the quantity of maybe you have a 4-piece and a 6-piece or something like that, then you could put that in here. So you could do pieces and then you could do 4, and then you could multiply this down, and then you would need to have 3 additional items because you need lemon pepper in a 6 count, and you need it in a 4 count. So this is that multiplying across in the video I mentioned, and I'll link it below. I'll put a pop-up or something, and basically where you can control which items are created, which variations are created. This is that control that gets multiplied across kind of automatically when you create this in the Square dashboard, but we have to do it manually in the spreadsheet. So next we have the current quantity, and this is the location, and then new quantity. Now this is another inventory control piece. Now the difference between sellable, stockable, and these quantities, it's not 100% clear to me. I've never really seen these used that often, but most of the time when you're doing inventory control, you'll be using these quantities. So we have the current quantity. So if there's a quantity in the system already, that's where that will display. But if we want to update the quantity, we need to put it in this new quantity field. Next, we have our stock alert enabled. Now this is a yes, no, and then this is the count. This is basically, do we want to be alerted when the stock, which is this quantity number, current quantity, goes below a certain number. So here, if we wanted that, we could put yes, an uppercase Y, and then the second field here is the count. So what number at which do we want to be notified? Because if you, and there's a default you can set, but if you have an item that you keep 3 of in stock, and you want to be alerted when there's only one, that's very different than keeping 100 of something in stock and you want to be alerted when there's 20 of them. So that's why you have this different options, because not all items do you stock in the same quantities. So we could say yes, we could say 5. Now it's not applicable in the food setting, but it's a useful little setting, mostly for retail. So next we have all of the modifier sets. So basically we just look at the names. So we have modifier set, additional side up charge, additional toppings, bloody options, brandy type, bread options. So there's various drink modifiers and also food modifiers. Now, what we can do in the spreadsheet is only enable and disable the modifier set on the item. So if we want to modify what's pre-selected, or set the minimum and maximum on a particular modifier set for a particular item, then we can't do that in the spreadsheet. We can just turn it on, and then that it eliminates a small step in the Square dashboard, but it might also create confusion. So if you have something that's going to use all the default options, definitely enabling it here is the way to go, super easy. And if you need to make more customizations, probably enabling it in the Square dashboard is the best option in that case. Now we'll go all the way to the end to our sales tax options, which aren't displaying here, but when there's multiple tax rates, what we do when there's multiple tax rates, multiple locations, we'll see at the end, we'll see our different tax options of the different taxes. So if you need to enable an additional alcohol tax, then you would have that separate as a separate tax, and then you can enable it and disable it per item. So that's what we would see. It'd be just like the modifier set. It just is for the sales taxes instead of for the modifier sets. So that's pretty much it with the spreadsheet. What I'll do now is upload it. So I'm going to save it, of course. And then I'm going to open up my Square dashboard again and go to Actions and then Import Library. And you can click here to browse a file, or I'm just going to drag it over from my Finder window on the other screen. And then we see it here. And then we have this option. Almost never will you want to use it. You can ignore it 99% of the time, but I'll tell you what it does in case you do ever need to use it. And what this does is It's exactly what it says. It overwrites the whole library. So all of the data that you have in the library will be replaced with exactly what's in the spreadsheet. And what's not in the spreadsheet? Images. There's no images or customizations on the modifier sets of pre-selections or the minimum maximum. There is any data that's not explicitly displayed in the spreadsheet will be removed from the item library. It won't remove your taxes and the tax rates that you've set up, but all of the item library, it will overwrite with the data that's explicitly in the spreadsheet. So it's not going to be like, oh, these images are from this, because we're overwriting everything and it's not going to connect those images again. So this is really only if you want to completely overwrite it, but I want you to know what it does. So once we have it uploaded, we'll click next, and then this is our sync data. And this is basically just if you're uploading your own spreadsheet or you've changed around your column names or anything like that, you just have to make sure that it syncs up here correctly. Now, because we exported it from Square and then we didn't change the column names and or anything, we can just skip this step. We can kind of look through, like if this doesn't look right, then look into it further. But if it looks right at first glance, just click next and it'll import it. And if there's any errors, it'll ask you to download the report, and it's very easy. You just look for the things in red, and it'll tell you what's wrong, and then you can re-upload that error file, which is another spreadsheet. All right, so we have our updates in the system, and that's how we edit a spreadsheet in a food service setting. And I think I'll make another video on a retail setting because there's a lot of other settings that aren't included here. So I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.